Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast shorts. There's no cost on these shorts episodes. These are now around 2 to 4 minute, sometimes as long as 6 to 10 minute observations, ideas, thoughts, or rants about the literature, philosophy, psychology, and even the theology of leadership. Because listening to me talk about leadership for now around 2 to 4 minutes is still better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Even that business book your coworker won't stop raving about because it quote unquote changed their life, but you can't see any difference in their leadership behavior. So how good could that author be?
What is the reason for the season? Well, it used to be religiously focused. The birth of the baby Jesus in a manger in a little backwater town used to be the most amazing story ever told in the history of the West. Sure, throughout much of Western Christendom, the focus was on the death and resurrection of Jesus the man, rather than the birth and gift-giving to Jesus the baby. But as the Catholic Church expanded, and as the Protestant Reformation pushed back against the excesses of the medieval church, the emphasis became more pronounced on the birth of Jesus. Part of this emphasis shift can be traced to the idea that, for much of Western history, children were valuable in terms of working on farms, following in their father's footsteps, and of course, for birthing new babies and moving forward inheritance and property. Once societies in the West became wealthier, right along the time of the Enlightenment, children became more valuable, and childhood, the state of being a child, became a much more valuable institution than it was during the times recorded, even in the Bible. Think about it. Even the ancient Greeks and Romans were limited in what they documented about the everyday life of a child. It just wasn't considered to be that important. But back to the baby Jesus. There are two primary focuses in postmodern Christianity in the West: Jesus on the cross and Jesus in the manger. Which one you, as a postmodern Christian in the West, value the most will tell other people where you have placed your focus in your Christian walk. Now, I have had people assert that the focus should be on both Jesus on the cross and Jesus in the manger, but the truth of reality is that Christians are oriented towards one or another in their hearts and in their theology. This orientation impacts your worldview, how you experience and integrate with culture, and even how you vote in elections. So, for you, and for everybody else this holiday season, what is the reason for the season?
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.